Well, I should introduce myself first. I'm Patricia Wilson. I'm 75 years old. Um, I'm the eldest of 7 children, a Catholic family. And yeah, I'm a bit of a workaholic. And I retired when I was 45, simply because I started another business, a catering business for people who couldn't afford a bit of posh, people who wanted a birthday party, but plastic plates and plastic forks. So I bought some nice stuff and did very low budget catering. And it worked very well. But the lady that I went into business with, she had a fruit and veg shop. So, of course, this helped to bring the price right down. And we were really doing well. And then one night she went to the bathroom. We were both 35. She went to the bathroom and her husband found her dead the next morning.
Oh my gosh.
Just made me think, oh my goodness me, what's the point? It made me think, what? Why? What's the point of making money when you can't spend it because you're chasing your tail from morning till night? And so I talked to my husband about it, and he was an electrician with a company called ICI. I don't know if you've heard of them in America. Anyway, they made the indigo dye for denim jeans. And because you know what, when you're 35, 45 seems quite old. I know, isn't that madness? And so he could retire when he was 50. And I thought, let's retire 10 years' time. So I said, well, I'll carry on working really hard for 10 years. Then my daughter will be hopefully at university, my son at college. The mortgage will be paid, everything. We'll be all comfortable. We'll be comfortable. So when I was 45, we sold the house, so I had a boat, had a car, had all sorts. Sold everything and went to a place in the sun. There's a television program here called A Place in the Sun. It's about people who retire to somewhere sunny. So we'd visited a few countries, Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, and we got a cheap last minute flight to Greece and just fell in love with it. Just fell in love with it. Really, it was a kind of madness that, for example, it was February. And so the tourist season hadn't started and most places were closed. And we found a little taverna and we went in and said, could we have something to eat? And he said, yes, but I'm really busy. Sit down there. And if anybody comes in, see what they want. And he left. The till was open and stuffed with money. We could have just run. And we didn't because we were both terrified. So he came back half an hour later and said, what would you like? What would you like? So we had some Greek food. And he said, no, I'm not going to charge you because you've just arrived. And he wouldn't even take the money. And he didn't even know our names at that point. And it was so surreal. You know what I mean? It was so bizarre. Anyway, so we were quite taken by this place. That was Crete. And so we went back and we stayed here and there and really liked it. So eventually we bought a house there, a really nice little house with 19 olive trees in the garden, and it was lovely. Old stone house. And so we bought it. We finished up in England and we moved out and we stayed in that place and absolutely loved it. And that's the first question. What ignited your relationship with Greece? Well, that was it really, live there. But 6 months later, we've been married. Now we've been married for 57 years. And we've been here for 30 years. So I'll let you work it out. Anyway, we've been married for quite a long time anyway. And then we both suddenly given up work. We're living in this lovely house. It's near the sea. I was bored to death. It was awful. What do you do? We sat there watching the telly and didn't like it. It was awful. So we started doing the garden, and why we have to be 2 feet apart all the way, wherever we go, we're next to each other. Oh my gosh, we started arguing, and I said, we started lying on the beach, sunbathing and swimming, and it was so boring. So I decided that every year on the 1st of January, I would challenge myself to something new. I would give myself a challenge and I would treat it like work, because I have to work, mate. I have to work. I'm one of those people who can't be comfortable to just lie on the bed and daydream. So I started challenging myself. So I learned to paint. I learned photography. I learned to snorkel and scuba. And I learned to plaster walls. I learned bricklaying. I learned gardening. I did all sorts of things anyway. And yeah, I really liked it. But 20 years later, I'd run out of things to do. Do you know, I'd learned to use a computer. Oh, what I haven't told you is I am very, very dyslexic. I have terrible trouble writing. I don't like writing. It's hard work for me. And I actually didn't learn to write until I was 43 years old and I bought a word processor. Now, for any of you under 50, you won't know what a word processor is. It's a typewriter, electric typewriter that with a spell check.
Yes.
So I really frightened the crap. Is that an American word? It is, isn't it? I frightened the crap out of that word processor with a spell check, because it didn't have a clue what I was talking about most of the time. But slowly but surely, I got the hang of using it. And do you know something? I mean, I'm sure you're in a book club, of course you can all write. To be able to put your thoughts down on paper is one of the most blessed things we are ever able to do. It's the one thing that separates us from animals. I mean, chimpanzees can sign language now, and dolphins understand instructions from sign language. So we can communicate, but nobody else can record their thoughts. What a wonderful thing it was. Oh, well, I couldn't get off this thing. I was writing poems and short stories and all sorts of nonsense. It was incredible. Anyway, later on, I bought a computer. In the year 2000, I bought a computer, and took me a year to learn how to use that. That was a monster. Sometimes I wanted to throw it out of the window, but I got the hang of it eventually, and I started to learn to write. So then the next year came, January the 1st came along. So I thought, my challenge for this year will be to write a novel.
Wow.
Yeah, wasn't that ridiculous? But I thought I could do it. So I wrote this story. It was called Greeks Bearing Gifts, and I paid a fortune for editors, and they were very good. I mean, they didn't actually say this is a load of rubbish. They told me where I was going wrong, and I learned and I learned and I learned. And the computer is a marvelous thing, a marvelous thing. And so I wrote this novel. So then the next year came around, and it took me a year to write it. And then the next year came around, and I thought, right, this is my next job, is to get this published. Wrapped it up, stuck the stamps on it, posted it, sat there waiting for the reply, the book offer, the film, everything. It didn't come. It didn't come. And then I sent it off to another 3 or 4 publishers. And my kids came on holiday, and there came this envelope from Random House. Do you know Random House?
Yes.
Big publishers anyway. Oh, big publishers. It was a really nice posh envelope. It was embossed. It wasn't cheap. I thought, oh, this is cheap. These are people with money, I thought. Fabulous. So I thought, I'm going to make this special. I'm not going to open it until we were all sitting down to a champagne breakfast. So we all went out, and we ordered breakfast outside this lovely restaurant, and we were all sitting down, and I said, I've got something to tell you all. I've got a reply from one of the biggest publishers in the world, and I'm so excited about it. And my daughter said, what does it say, Mum? I said, well, I've saved it to open, all together. So I opened it, and I cried for an hour because it said, not for us.
It said what?
That was it. Not for us, it said. I cried. Anyway, so I learned a big lesson there. So anyway, the next year I went on to my biggest failure of all. I bought a guitar, and I thought I'd learn to play guitar. Thought I was like female Eric Clapton. I have big ambitions. Anyway, that didn't work either, but never mind. I bought a better guitar because I blamed the guitar, but it still didn't work. Now the local school has them both. Anyway, I did that for a year. I went back to photography, which I was very successful with photography. I sold some pictures to National Geographic. That's my biggest achievement in photography. And so the years went on, and we moved house in Crete. And I was plastering this house. I love to plaster. It's like icing a giant cake. That's what it's like. And all, they eat the damn cake, and then but with plastering, you're looking at it and you hang your pictures on it and you think, wow, I didn't do a bad job there, so it's really great. I like plastering. Anyway, well, it's not that easy, girls. I'm telling you. We're quite enjoying this remote mountain village. And there was a Sunday market, and I bought some strawberries and planted them. And I was digging the garden and I hit something metal. And when I scrabbled around in the dirt, it was a machine gun.
Oh, wow.
Rusted machine gun. I think I wrote it in the back of the book, didn't I? Did I? Yeah. So, I mean, it was astonishing. And I took it to the Cafe Neon, which is like the living room of the village. And the men came, and they all tried to tell me their stories. Anyway, I thought, well, now I've learned how to write a book, I'll learn how to write a book properly, and I'll write this story. So I recorded the things they told me because I didn't understand what they were saying. I was just hoping I was nodding in the right places. And I took the recording to my Greek teacher, and she burst into tears, and that was the end of that. So I had to wait another week for her to transcribe what these men had said. And it was such a story. And yeah, a regular war story. They'd gone away. Half of them had gone away to war in Albania, and the other half had been at home, and there'd been a massacre, and they died. They'd been shot, these men, the village men. So the only people left in the village, the males left in the village, were brothers and fathers and uncles that were fighting in Albania at the time. Anyway, I started writing this story, and about 2 months later, this little old lady came knocking on the door. 90 years old, all in black. It looked like a bit like something from Halloween, very gaunt, and no disrespect, but yeah. And she started telling me something. I asked her to sit down, brought her some water, and she started telling me something really emotional, and she was crying, and she was grabbing my arm and saying, oh, crossing herself. And so I got the little recorder out again and pressed the button and recorded what she told me, took it to the school the next Wednesday, and the teacher burst into tears. I mean, she was so upset. And she started telling me what had happened in the village to the women. And it was awful. And it's gone off my question. Oh, wait a minute. One of your questions is about do you draw from personal experiences when you write? I do, yes. Are any of the characters real based on the people you know? Well, yes, the people are from the village, but I really had to tone it down a lot and change the names and change their personality so they weren't recognizable, because this lady that told me the story had been raped and she'd never told anybody before. And I couldn't put that in a book because she had family. Of course, she didn't have a husband anymore, but she had family, grandsons. You can't have. I couldn't do it anyway, so I changed it a lot. Island of Secrets, the part where I did this with great drama, and I was really pleased with the scene where the Germans were going to shoot the doctor, and then they all turned around and mowed down the whole village, all the village men. But it didn't happen like that. You know what they did? They tied them all up. I get emotional just repeating this, but they tied their hands behind their backs and they lined them up, and they pulled them out and shot them 10 at a time. So 10-year-old boys saw the fathers and grandfathers shot. and knew they were going to be next. You know, how could you possibly write that? Of course I couldn't. And the lady that told me her story, it was her father was killed. They locked all the women in the church, actually, but she had gone to the next village and she was coming back and she missed being locked up. And two soldiers found her on the path between the two villages, and you weren't supposed to go out, and they raped her. And then they just physically kicked her until she was unconscious. Well, they thought she was dead, I guess. And when she came to, she went back to Amira, and she got there as they were killing the men, and she watched. And I couldn't write that. It still upsets me to think that it happened, even though it was, what, 80 something years ago. How people, I think we are capable of stirring up enough drama, and I was pleased with that book. I think it portrayed the evil of war and the hopelessness of helpless people in small villages, and that was what I wanted to do. And it makes me cry when I read it. Still, it makes me cry. I cried every time I edited it. I'm a real baby about this stuff. But I couldn't possibly put the real things that happened. And her father was killed. And the Greek Orthodox Church, is anybody Greek there? No. Okay. Well, the Greek Orthodox Church, people, well, a lot of religions are the same. They want to be buried whole. And so her father, they'd shot him in the head, to the front of his head, and blown his brains out. She couldn't find all the back of his head. She told me this. It's just terrible to listen to, and to try and put yourself in that person's place and imagine how they felt is very difficult. It's very draining and very emotional. But even so, I couldn't put that in the book because it's too much, it's too real and it's too awful. And anyway, it's like sensationalizing without by telling the truth, So yeah, the people are real. And I was criticized for doing this by some readers. The shepherd was real, and it was a bit sexual, but you can't have it all the same all the way through because it's exhausting. It's exhausting for me to write, and it must be exhausting to read as well. And I rather like the idea that the shepherd was a dirty, stinky old man, but he was so honourable. He was so honourable, and he lost his life going back down the road to take down those hanging women. And that was true. They hung them. They hung the midwife and the young midwife at the side of the main road. And it's such an honour to be able to write this stuff. But it does weigh heavy on me sometimes emotionally. Yeah. Right, enough about that. I'll start sniveling in a minute. Right, and where are we?
Patricia, just the part about how you got it published then, or what feedback you got about the emotional aspects. Did the publishers really like
it? The publishers love it. The more emotional it is, they love it. They love it. And yeah, the more I put into it, the more they want. I'm writing a true story now. I've just started it today, actually, for 2026, and I've just started it. I'm just starting to write a little bit and research. And this is a really lovely, lovely emotional story. And I'm just excited because I've got so much research to do. And it's much earlier than I usually write, in the last war. I have written one about the First World War, but this is even before that. This is in 1852, the Peloponnese Wars. Yeah, and so it's all new to me. I don't know anything about it. Because I was dyslexic, I didn't do anything at school. I didn't learn anything at school. I could paint, sew, and cook. That was it. So now being able to read and look up stuff, thank God for Google, you can Google anything. Really, it's great. So I'm just starting to Google on all that stuff now. Yeah. So what time of day do you find best for writing? Well, now, yeah, 3, 4, 5 o'clock. It must be when your brain relaxes, and I've got a set of facts in my head. The what if, what if this happened, or what if that happened? Oh my goodness! I have to get up and I come in here. This is my little office. I've blurred the background. Anyway, you don't want to see it. But this is my little office. It's a small room, 3.5 meters by 3.5 meters. And it has a bed settee in here, but it's always piled up with printed stuff and books and all kinds of junk. And I clear it every once in a while when I'm getting visitors. And
Yeah.
yeah, this is where nobody interrupts me. And if I'm really hard at work, I've got a hook on the outside of the door, and I have a piece of paper like this, and I write on recording, and I stick it on the hook outside. Nobody comes in, because nobody wants to be recorded coming through the door. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's so exciting. I do absolutely lose myself in the story. So it seems like you really throw yourself into tragic historical events. I do, yes, it's true. To provide such detail, how do you emotionally deal with writing about such sad, riveting events? It is hard, that, but there's something very cleansing about crying. And some of these things make me cry every time. And actually, if they didn't make me cry, then I haven't written it properly, because if my child died or my mother died, well, she did, of course I cried. And if I haven't drawn that emotion, then I haven't done a very good job, I think. I mean, there is another lady who writes about historical fiction of the Greek islands, and she's been much more successful than me, but doesn't move me at all. And a lot of people say the same thing. Excuse me. And yes, I can't write a bland story, because if it doesn't make me laugh out loud or cry real tears, then I haven't done a very good job, I think. It's not so much about the words you use or the correct, because I still don't know what an adverb is, for goodness sake. I just write what comes into my head and what works and what has a kind of da 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 da. I like a bit of poetry, and I like it. I like the sentences to go like that and not be like a history book that's boring and information. I don't want information. I want emotion. So yes, it is quite exhausting, that. How long do these events take to write? Well, I just write them down. I can't really answer that at all. I'll keep a check on my next book, and I'll let you know if we do this again. I like how Maria stresses the importance of telling the story to Angelica, and that Angelica should in turn publish the story. Well, this came about because I didn't know how to end it. I mean, Maria had to die. She was old, we were all going to die, aren't we? I mean, well, hopefully later rather than sooner, but at the end of a book is a good time. Sometimes I'm typing, I get a pain in my chest, and I think, oh, not now, let me get to the end. Because, there's a time for these things, isn't there? A time to live and a time to die. Isn't that a song? Anyway, so that's how that came, the end of that story. I came up with it, and the publishers accepted it. Do you draw from personal experience? Oh, right, about Maria's son planted his shoes because he wanted them to grow like the tomatoes. My little boy did that. He buried his shoe. He had one of those little plastic watering cans, that children have, and he watered it. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "They're too tight, they need to grow." Bad mother me not noticing he's grown out of his shoes. But so that did come from there. And that, yeah, quite often in this this book that's coming out next, it's about a young Greek girl who wants to be the first female surgeon in Greece, and well, in Crete. And her grandmother cuts a chicken up and puts it in a pot to make soup. And when the grandmother's gone out, she takes it out of the pot and sews the wings back on and sews the legs back on. And because she wants to be a surgeon, so she thinks, childish, she thinks she's only 7 or 8 years old. She must learn to sew limbs back together. No concept of blood vessels and things. And I put that in because my granddaughter, last summer they came here and she wanted to be a surgeon. She's 17 now, but she was 16 at the time. And I said, she's very clever, top of the class. And I said, have you got any ideas what you want to do? And she said, I think I'll be a surgeon. So I'm thinking, plastic surgeon? She said, no, a proper surgeon. Okay. So I said, all right, then next time you come, we'll have a practice. I'll buy a pig because you can buy, whole sheep and whole lambs. Any vegetarians there? Oh, good. Okay, so I said, I'll buy a piglet and you can operate on it. Take its heart out, see what that's like, actually cutting into a pig and taking its heart out. And she said, will it be dead? Yes, I'll get it from the butchers. Anyway, so she's changed her mind now. She wants to be a mathematician or a politician. Fair enough. Fair enough. So that's how, things still in my head that when I was writing this, and I thought, and so she sews the wings back on the chicken, but unfortunately loses a needle in the pot.
Oh.
So yes. So yeah, I do draw from things that really happen, and I have got a sense of humor, and I would love to write comedy. Maybe one day will. Maybe one day. How do you go about developing a storyline? Do you map it out first? No, do you know what? I get an idea and then I research it. And the story comes from the research. Because it's just history. History is absolutely fascinating, I think. Absolutely fascinating. I came in England from, I always say from Liverpool, but actually it was across the River Mersey, Birkenhead, and it was one of the biggest shipbuilding places in the world. And I've just discovered this amazing thing about it, and such a story. And that's what I'm writing now. It's incredible. 2026 book club. So real stories, yeah. So I research it, and then so I try to tie in my home country and Greece, because I know my home country pretty well, and I'm pretty good with the history of Greece. And so I try and knit the two together. And this is really not so difficult because, for example, my last book was about Corfu, the island of Corfu, and Princess Alice, which was, I'm a royalist as well, so I do the Queen, God bless her. Prince Philip's mother was the princess of Greece and Denmark, and she was born stone deaf. And her mother, who was a bit of a witch, a queen anyway, and she made her learn sign language and lip reading, and she learned to speak 7 languages and lip read 7 languages. How difficult is that? And she was an amazing woman, but unfortunately, this guy, Sigmund Freud, just defamation of character, I think is the right phrase to use. She was put in an asylum, and she tried to escape, and it was a tragedy what happened to her. In the war, she sold the crown jewels and opened up soup kitchens and fed the starving children of Athens, because I think 7 million people died of starvation in Athens in the war. And she was an amazing woman. She hid Jews in her attic in the city while it was occupied by Nazis. And this woman was marvelous. And I had the honor of actually writing her into a story. And I loved it. I loved it. Let's put the record straight here. She wasn't some frustrated old biddy. She was a deaf woman whose husband went off with playgirls and to Monte Carlo and places like that. And she was left on her own, and she really struggled. And she was just good. And when the Queen and Prince Philip got married, she had no money left from the after the war. So she took down the palace curtains and made herself an outfit for the wedding. Isn't that great? Like I mean, who needs to make stuff up? There are so many great people and great stories about. That is incredible. And coincidences. You can put coincidences together and make a great story. The Titanic is so famous, but so I wrote about the sister ship. I don't know if anybody's read that about the Britannic. Okay, so the Britannic also sailed out of Liverpool, and it sank here in Greek waters, and it's very near the surface, and it's exactly the same as the Titanic. And it's just a terrible thing happened when it hit a mine, blew a hole in the side. It's supposed to be unsinkable like the Titanic, but it went down. And a terrible thing happened when they lowered the lifeboats with the people in. There was miscommunication between the lifeboat handlers and the captain. And they lowered the lifeboats, and the captain, and it was going down nose first, so the propellers were almost out of the water. The captain started the propellers again. So the lifeboat was sucked into the propellers, and the people on number 1 lifeboat were chopped up.
Oh my goodness.
On lifeboat number 2, of course, the propellers were stopped, but it was too late. Lifeboat 2 also got mashed a little bit. But one of the nurses who had also survived the Titanic, I mean, how remarkable is that, to be on this ship? And she went down, the propeller hit her head. Years later, it was found she had a fractured skull. But she went down, and an arm came round and lifted her up to the surface again. And they pulled her out of the water into a lifeboat. The only bizarre thing about it was just an arm.
Oh, wow.
How weird is that? How weird is that? I mean, oh, so many things like that happen. I just, there's no need to make stuff up at all. I mean, it could have been a leg, or it could have been a head, or it could have been anything coming back up to the surface that was underneath it, but it was an arm. She thought there was a person attached to it, but there wasn't. Wow. Yeah, let me see. So all the characters are based on people I know, but I changed them because, as I say, it's not fair to use people in that way at all, I don't think. Is it difficult to get a book onto Audible or other audio devices? That's not my job at all. I don't do that at all. The cover, the title, all those, the audio books, that is all the publisher. All I do is write a story, and then it's edited. I edit it about 17 times. And that's, I rather like the edit because I learn an awful lot from editing. And it's made my writing better. I'm sure I write better now than I did with that first book. And I have got one I dislike the most, and I have got one that I like the most. The one I like the most is Secrets of Santorini. And the one I like the least is my favorite book, actually, is
That's your favorite book, The Greek Island Escape?
that's my favorite book. That's
Okay.
my favorite story. Yes. See if I can get it into focus. I'm not very good at this videoing stuff. Anyway, it's Greek Island Escape, and it was told to me by the local restaurateur where I go. Sometimes they do a British Sunday dinner. We have a specific dinner, and I went there one day. He said to me, "Do you know, my family have a story, but you must swear that you will never tell anyone where the story came from." Well, apart from the restaurants, of course. But anyway, the restaurant's closed down now, so it was a very interesting story, he told me. Anyway, he didn't even tell me the names of the people, so I just made them up. And yes, I like it very much. And my favorite voice as well is, as well as being the favorite cover, my favorite voices are in Secrets of Santorini, because they are Irish. It's from, has anybody been to Ireland? Dublin.
Yeah.
Have you? Dublin is the most amazing city. And Dublin is so like Crete. The people, the mentality of the people is so like Crete. And they have a lot of similar things. Irish dancing, you know, although it's like tap dancing. And they keep their arms straight by the sides. Greek dancing, you know, they have their arms up in the air, but it's very similar in the passion of it. You know, I like both, to watch both. The Irish play the fiddle and the Greeks play the lyra, but it looks like a fiddle. They just play it differently. And the Irish brew this pochine made of potatoes, fermented potatoes, this liquor. And the Greeks make raki out of the pith and the skins of the grapes, of the fermented grapes. And that was another question, wasn't it? About how do you prefer your raki? Straight. Or raki. It's nice. It's very good. Yeah. No headache. It's good. No bloodshot eyes. No, it's good.
That's good. No ice?
No ice. No.
Okay.
No, just straight. Yeah. And they bang it on the tin table with gusto, and they say yamas, which means good health. And the reason they do that is because you can see it, you can taste it, but you can't hear, you can smell it, but you can't hear it. So you use all the senses. So they bang it on the table so you can hear it as well. It includes all the senses with raki.
Oh, I guess we didn't drink it similar. Yeah.
Yeah. And they use it for all sorts. I mean, they used to use it for, it's alcohol, you know, they used to use it for sterilizing instruments. Certainly they put it on mosquito bites. They rub it on babies' gums, you know, when they're teething.
Oh.
Yes. Shuts them up. Have I covered everything?
That's everything. I think that's all of them. But yeah.
Has anybody else got any other questions? Would anybody like to write a book? Has anybody written a book?
Oh, no.
No.
It sounds too hard.
Well, it's like one bite. How do you eat an elephant? You know, one bite at a time. It's all right. Just do it slowly.
I have a question. How do you
Yeah.
know you have enough research for your book?
Oh, on the internet. Research, internet.
When do you
Yeah,
have?
so I'm writing this book now. I've just started it today, as I say. It's about I'm just looking up everything now. I found all sorts of things. There's an old book written in 1859. That's it's not in print, of course, but there's a copy for sale. So with Oxfam, secondhand. Do you have Oxfam? You have Oxfam in America, I'm sure. Yes. So Oxfam have quite a big bookshop, chain of bookshops in Great Britain, and they've got a copy of this book. And so I've just bought it. So I'll read that back to front and I'll use it for reference. And yeah, I think it's quite easy to research. People are more difficult. For Island of Secrets, my lawyer in Crete, her father was a bandit, Andartes, you know, he was fighting as a freedom fighter. And he was the last one of the group that was left that was involved in the massacre of Amiras. And so I went to him and again, I recorded what he told me. That was very interesting. Very interesting, yeah, to hear what he had to say. And he blamed the British. And so I'm not the least bit shy about, you know, pointing out that I'll never get a knighthood or anything because I'm gonna, yeah, you know, they shouldn't do these things if they don't want it known. Churchill, I mean, okay, he did a lot of good. But the thing is I've discovered nobody wins the war by being nice. Nobody. And so, I mean, we see this now with Palestine and Israel. It's just too awful. And yeah. So there is so much information. And I try not to pick sides, but you know, it's so great to beat the Nazis, isn't it? I keep doing it. So yeah, but I hope I can maybe write something. I mean, no nation are all bad people, and no nation are all good people. It's just finding the right mix. I love the Greeks. I do. And I think it comes over in my books anyway. I hope so. But it's, you know, nobody's all good and nobody's all bad. And it's very difficult to, I find that difficult to make it. I mean, in this book I'm writing now, there are sharks. Now they are all bad. But there are wildlife people that say, oh no, they're beautiful animals. Well, yeah, fine. No, you wouldn't say that if it bit your leg off, mate. You know. You know, I lost my leg, but it was a lovely shark. So I do try to be fair. It's not always easy. Have any of you seen the film on Netflix called The Swimmers?
About the two sisters.
It's about, sorry?
Is it about the two sisters?
It is that escape from Syria.
Excellent, excellent film.
True story. Yeah. I really wanted to write that, you know, that's exactly. And here, I'm telling you a secret now. It's not going on. Oh, I can't tell you till because you're recording this, aren't you? Can't tell you now. When you stop recording it, I'll tell you.